Hey guys, haven't done a video out here for a while, have we? Winter in the rice fields of Japan is a fairly dry and dead looking place, isn't it? So fairly mild winter that we're having, but nevertheless, this is what it looks like. So, today's topic is a growing problem in Japan, absenteeism. So school students not wanting to go to school, and not going to school, in fact. So the most recent statistics we saw on this was a year or so ago, and they were saying that about 3.7% of students are absent from school more than 30 days of the year. This is without a reason, so they're not sick or anything like that. It's just because they're just not going. 30 days or more a year, and half of them are absent more than 90 days of the year, which, if you take off weekends, there's 265 days in the year, take off holidays, if they're missing 90 days a year, they're missing almost half a school year, which is not good, is it? So there's got to be a lot of reasons for this. As with most social sort of problems, there's usually multiple reasons, and we're seeing this talked about on television and now and again, and it's a growing problem. It's been growing, the problem's been growing for the last 20 years, and every year the percentage of students that are doing this is getting higher and higher. So the reasons that they give when their parents are asked why the kids aren't going, the number one reason is lack of motivation, which is, I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't terribly motivated to go to school when I was a kid, but I went. There was no staying at home because I wasn't motivated, that's for sure. Number two, not so funny, anxiety and depression. Number three is because they're failing at school, so they don't want to go because they're failing. And number four is friendship issues, or relationship issues with other students. So a whole heap of things have contributed to this, no doubt. COVID contributed to it because Japan was really over the top, still is, in regards to COVID as far as staying away and isolating, and so that's sort of made it like normal. I mean, it was already normal in Japan if students have a temperature over 37 degrees. This is before COVID and now, but before COVID as well. The standard is that if they have a temperature over 37 degrees, that they have to stay home. And it's a case by case, school by school thing, or school district by school district thing, but the average seems to be that if the kid has a temperature over 37 degrees, then they have to stay home. And those of you who have kids know, it's not unusual for a kid to have a temperature over 37 and be quite fine, but it's really normal. A lot of families here, including ours, kids' temperatures are taken every morning before they go to school, and if they're over 37, they stay home. And that's the policy of the local school district, and that's quite normal in Japan. So that's sort of normalized, that sort of behavior has normalized staying home, and we've seen this, digressing for a moment, we have seen this with adults, and I've talked about this on previous videos, that we'll have plans to do things with other people, and at the last moment they'll cancel because the husband's caught a cold, or the lady's caught a cold, or someone's caught a cold, so they can't go anywhere, and it's really normal in Japan for a lot of reasons. We've talked about this before. The main thing is sort of consideration for others, so that if you've got a cold, you don't go and meet your friends because you don't want to give them a cold, so it's consideration for others. But that sort of thing is sort of normalized, not going to work or not going to school, in this case, not going to school, so that's sort of normalized it a little bit. So it's made staying home from school not such a big deal. And so year by year, it's become more common. You might just be able to hear the school bell ringing in the distance. The other one is, a fear of suicide. We're still getting 30,000 suicides a year in Japan, and one of the demographics of that is high school students, that they have too much pressure, so they kill themselves, and there's sort of an awareness of that problem. There's not a lot of solutions going on, but there's an awareness of that problem, and that the result of that seems to be a reluctance to push. Now, one of our family members was struggling with going to school, and it was interesting to hear the reactions from the teacher at school. The teacher's advice was, don't push, don't push her, don't push her. And then they had a counsellor that specialises in counselling kids, and his advice, only advice too, I'll add, was don't push, don't push. And it just seems to be across the board. There's this thing, you know, we've talked about in previous videos, mental health care in Japan is still like 60 years behind the rest of the modern world, you know. And so it's not a real common thing here. It's not a thing here that most people think about or understand or have any idea about. And so it's sort of in its infancy. So they've sort of realised that pushing people too much can make them kill themselves, but they don't really have an alternative, right? Now, our alternative with our family member was to talk about it. Now, the teacher didn't do it, the counsellor didn't do it, you know, nobody sort of did it. We did it on the doctor, that was right, the GP too. The GP's advice, don't push, right? In our family member's case, we just talked about it. Look, you know, it's always hard for people to go to school or go to work, and talked through it, you know, and how is today, and what makes you anxious at school, and, you know, what do you like doing at school, and modern counselling, right? Modern counselling, which is something that didn't come from any other source. It had to come from me, to be honest, because it's just not a normal thing in Japan. You know, it's just, if you live in a Western country, even if you haven't done any, you know, proper reading of counselling or psychology or any experience of it personally, you would have heard about it. You know, in a lot of Western or modern societies now, you hear discussion of all sorts of counselling and psychology and things like that fairly commonly, don't you? Whereas in Japan, you just don't. They don't talk about it. So they know that they have a problem with suicide, but they don't really have any solutions to it. And in this case, they're worried about the kids getting pushed too much. So they don't do any counselling of the kid of how to deal with being at school. They just say to the parents, don't push. Now, the result of that is obviously 3.7% of kids, if they don't want to go to school, the parents just don't push and the kid doesn't go to school, right? And because that's the accepted strategy, don't push. So, you know, you can imagine, I mean, most of us when we were school age, you know, if we got up in the morning and didn't want to go to school, imagine how often we would have gone if we just had to say to our parents, don't want to go today, and our parents went, oh, okay, you can stay home. Can you imagine how often some of us would have gone to school? You know, obviously, kids. So, you know, obviously the best counselling is to explain to them, you know, that, you know, why they have to go and why going to school is important, and you know, that everybody has trouble sometimes getting motivated to go to school in the morning, and deal with all whatever's causing the anxiety, whether it's the you know, there is a lot of stress in Japan about passing and results and competing and all that sort of thing. So there is a lot of pressure at school. That's what results in all the suicides amongst the high school students, is one of the reasons. There's other reasons too. There's bullying. We've talked about that in other videos. Bullying's still a huge thing in Japan. So bullying and failing at things can result in kids being suicidal, you know, and high school students do it all the time because they you know. So again, instead of counselling them on that and say, look, just do your best, it doesn't really matter, and that sort of thing, they just don't counsel them at all. Got to tell you, it's frustrating sometimes when you hear about how some of these things are being dealt with. It just leaves you shaking your head. And then if you're in a relationship with Japanese people, that's where they are. They're with the normal Japanese way of thinking, and they're not into the psychology. Usually, I do actually happen to know a Japanese lady who's a psychologist, so there are exceptions, but usually Joe Public, you know, Yoshi Public, the standard Japanese people, haven't had any experience of counselling or therapy at all, or psychology or psychiatry and any understanding of it at all. So when sensei says, see, this is the thing, the school teacher and the counsellor and the GP, the doctor, are all sensei, right? And when sensei says something, then everybody just listens high, and nobody thinks for themselves or looks into it further themselves. They just accept it, and that's it. So you imagine if all those sensei touchy, all those special, all those people that are supposed to know about such things advise don't push the kid, you can imagine the result. The parents are all going to go, oh, okay then, and the kid wants to stay home, the kid just stays home. And we know lots of families that are like that. The kids sort of basically do whatever they want. You know, the parents don't stop them doing anything. They're staring at their smartphones all day and staring at their games all day, and don't want to go to school. Don't want to go to school because they want to stay home and play games, right? So obviously they're kids, and the parents just let them. So that's obviously one of the biggest contributing factors, you know. So and every year it gets worse, and it's amazing when we get things like this happening, like the suicide problem. I mean, they're two separate problems, right? The suicide problem and the not going to school problem. But it's interesting that often when they recognize a problem, they'll talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and you'll see it on TV, you'll hear about it on TV. They'll have these panels of people talking about suicide, and you get Sensei there, and usually the panel of Joe Publics are all sitting there together, and then Sensei's off on his own, and then the interviewer, and everybody's go, whoa, and Sensei says his stuff, and quite often in that case, the Sensei, most of what he's saying is stuff from 50, 60 years ago. It's just outdated now, and you hear what they're saying and think, oh geez, really, we're still thinking like that, are we? You know. So that's the common thread with this school thing and with the with the suicide thing is the lack of understanding about counselling and mental health and all that sort of stuff, you know. And soft parenting. I mean, it's just become a thing here that parents just don't seem to push their kids to do anything. You know, we often family friends and extended family and so on that have kids, and I mean, some of them are great. There's exceptions to everything I've just said. There's exceptions to it, of course. There are exceptions to it, but quite often, you know, we're places where there's kids behaving really badly and their parents just oblivious to it. They just let them do whatever they want, and it is a bit of a thing in modern Japanese society that's what they're like. So, you know, you put that with these other things, and the kid doesn't want to go to school. He doesn't go to school. So it's a thing. It's a thing. So in our case, with our family member, we've managed to solve it. It took a few months and went from missing a bit of school here and there to missing no school at all now. So we managed to solve it just by using the same techniques that you guys would be aware of, you know, just talking about it and finding out what the difficulties are and talking about the positives and the negatives and just talking about it, you know, talking through it. But that came from me, to be honest. I've got to be honest with you. It came from me because my wife was just quite happy just to follow the Sensei advice and just don't push. And that's all she said to me. Oh, Sensei says don't push. And that was it. And I said, what advice? And we're talking about the teacher and the counsellor and the GP, the doctor. And I said, what advice did they actually give to her? And none. And I asked her too. I said to her, what did they say to you, honey? Did they give you some advice? No. Right. Most of the talking they didn't actually do with the kid. They did with the mother. And then all they really said to her was, all of them said to her was, don't push. That's all they said. Which just, it's not helpful, is it? That's not going to solve the problem, is it? So all it took was for just me to spend some time, still am, every day, you know, a little bit of quiet time here and there, going here or going there in the car and having a chat, and solved it, basically, solved it. So probably out of those 3.7%, which is pretty high, isn't it? 3.7% of kids, that's about 1 out of every class. Classes here are about 35 kids, so about 1 kid out of every class is just not going to school because they don't want to, you know? And most of those probably easily solvable, you know? There'd be probably some that would have big issues that would take a lot of solving, but probably for the majority of them, just some good counselling, some modern counselling, you know. So just the lack of mental health care, the lack of good counselling, the lack of good therapy, you know, just across the board. So yeah, I think I've covered it all. Yeah, change thinking. Parents just accept it, yeah, not pushing. So that's basically it. So yeah, if you hear about that one, and it's growing every year, so we've sort of been hearing about it more and more, because as these things like the suicide thing and suicide thing, not so much, they don't talk about it much. It comes up now and again, but this they sort of accept it. I mean, if you haven't seen that video already, we've already covered that topic. It's sort of an acceptable thing to do here in Japan. They don't sort of push back against it very much. But this school thing, because, you know, they pride themselves on their academic thing and working hard and gambadoing, and that's sort of, I'll tell you something, that's something I don't hear anymore either. Gambare, and do your best, try hard. And it used to be And not so long ago, like 20 years ago, if kids were struggling a bit, gambare, 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 do your best, do your best, do your best. And on that video about suicide we talked about, they'd say that too much. So people would get to their limit, and then everybody around them would just keep saying, gambare, 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 do your best, do your best, do your best. And then they go and kill themselves because they'd reached their limit. And we talked about in that video that sometimes the gambare thing's too much. And now they've gone the other way. They've sort of realised that the gambare thing's too much. So now they've stopped saying it. And I actually said to my wife recently, I haven't heard a parent or a teacher say gambare to a kid for as long as I can remember. They've just stopped saying it. They've just got this give up. Tell you something, I'm not hearing gambare anymore, but I'm hearing give up. They say it in English, give up, give up, give up, give up, which is the opposite of gambare, right? But give up, and I've heard that a few times. Kids, that it's just something that, the tennis, and how's tennis? Oh, you give up, he gave up. How's baseball? How's English class? One of our relatives was going to an English class, and recently I said to the parents, how's the English class? Give up, give up. Is it too hard? Too hard. The kid didn't want to go anymore, and we hear this all the time too. The kids just don't want to go anymore. They don't want to go to school anymore. They don't have to go. They don't want to go to English lesson anymore. They don't have to go. One of our friends is an Englishman, and he has English classes, does English classes, and I start talking to him about this topic, and he goes off because he gets sick of it. He does his best to try and help these kids learn English, and then suddenly they just give up. They say they don't want to go anymore, and the parents go, and so then the parents just say to him, he doesn't want to go anymore. He doesn't want to do it anymore. Give up. Give up. So, that Japanese psyche, they've gone the other way from the old days when they were too much, pushing too much, to now not pushing at all. So, with no solutions, with no solutions to these problems, just give up. The good communication, good guidance, good counselling is just not here, and even not between parents and kids. And we see that all the time too. The parents just don't know how to talk to their kids or how to lead them and guide them, and and I mean, I've been lucky. I've got a really, really, really good wife, but she's Japanese too, so she's been brought up in an environment where she was never really counselled and steered by her parents. She was told what to do, gambare, gambare, and do this and do that, but she wasn't really counselled and guided, so she's not used to that either, and she doesn't know anyone else who's ever had that experience or who's ever done that. And none of her friends, mamatachi they call them here, the other friends of hers that are mothers, they don't do it either. Again, there are exceptions to this, but the majority, no idea. Absolutely no idea. We see it with our friends and family all the time with their kids, and they just got no idea. And they go, doshio, what should we do? What should we do? Doshio, doshio. They don't know what to do. So it's all connected. The absenteeism from school, the suicides, the problems in relationships, and then the problems, the kids themselves at school having problems with each other is one of the reasons, one of those reasons, number 4 it was, one of the reasons why some kids don't want to go to school. And again, it's all connected, isn't it? That the teacher's not sitting 2 kids down saying, listen, you guys, got to work this out and stop fighting with each other. They don't do that sort of thing. And the senpai kohai thing, the senior friend, junior friend thing here results in bullying. And the bullying's one of the other reasons that some kids don't want to go to school. And again, instead of dealing with bullying, instead of dealing with the bullies and those being bullied and solving those problems, they just, doshio, what should we do? What should we do? So it is frustrating. It's sort of like living in the past, I talk to my mother in Australia sometimes, and because she's really old, I'm really old, so she's older. She talks about things. When I tell her about some of these things, she goes, that was like Australia in the 50s. And some of you older folks watching this would probably recognise some of these behaviours from the 50s. What it was like in the 50s and the 60s is what it's like here now. So living in this society, people talk about how advanced Japan is, and as far as some technology it is, but as far as social structure and as far as psychology and mental health, it's just 50, 60 years behind everybody else, So it is frustrating sometimes. Look, I keep myself sane by focusing just on the people that I can help You know, these other people, you know, when we're in the parks and see crazy stuff happening and bad parenting going on, and you can't do anything about that. Or when you see these statistics, it's really sad when you see statistics like that, you know, because you know it could be solved. A lot of that could be solved with some good counselling. Some good counsellors in the schools that knew what they were doing could solve that, you know, and some helping the parents and guiding the parents to help the parents guide the kids. You know, it could be solved. So seeing these things that could be solved, that aren't being solved, can be frustrating, but we can only do what we can do. So that's my thinking, is that the people that I can affect, you know, my own kids and my nieces, I've got nieces here that I can help with, and, you know, other family members that I can help with, and that's all you can do. You know, you can't do anything further than that, really. Friends, I've got some friends, the English guy I mentioned. I help him sometimes, I think. He helps me too. We sit and have some good talks. We have some good talks and help keep each other sane. You know, some of you guys who are living here would recognise that. You know, that really helps if you've got, and I'm lucky, I happen to have a really good wife who's really good, and we do have good talks as well, but it does help to speak to another non-Japanese person about some of these things sometimes, because to them it's all normal. If I talk to my wife about all this, she just goes, oh, it's normal, you know, futsu. And so sometimes it does help to speak to another non-Japanese person. So that English guy and I sit down sometimes and restore each other's sanity, you know, a bit. So that's what we can do. That's what we can do. So it's worthwhile. Nice out here, isn't it? So they don't do much in winter, obviously. They don't do much. Usually the farmers just burn off this dead grass. And when there's no wind like today, they'll burn off the dead grass, and they get their tractors out and turn over the dirt, turn over the grass, so that that's the bottom of the rice plant that you can see there. So they'll run backwards and forwards with their tractor and turn it over, so turn that grass to the bottom and the soil to the top. So that's sort of some of those machines you can hear in the distance. There's some of that behaviour going on. Anyway, that was that. So just a thing, just a Japanese culture thing really, but it's in the news. So those of you in Japan have probably already heard about this. And interesting reflection of Japanese society and Japanese thinking going on there. Anyway, there was that. More videos coming soon.